Okay, so thank you for this interview. It's my first time having those two people with interviews, so I'm a little nervous, I have to say that.
Okay.
Well, you have like so many years ago, that was the first time you came to the first conference and you presented VIG and we started training. So the main idea will be like what it's for you both in your different roles. See how VIG is now in Juconi, how this is changing, and how VIG is recognized. Maybe for you, Terri, because you didn't meet so like
Right.
every month
Right.
is another view. So that's why I'm thinking the two different views that you have about the VIG in Juconi in Mexico and how the VIG was received in the other conference that you came before. If you noticed some difference, so.
Yeah, maybe for you to start, since you have this
Right,
span
I
of
don't
time.
have the repeated
right.
experience.
Yeah, you have
because you've been
the
coming so
wide,
many
yeah,
times
right.
that you've watched the growth. It's like with your babies. It's much harder to sort of notice when they grow if you see them every day.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I see is that the Juconi folks that I talk to, are experts at VIG. I see an awful lot of deep understanding of the importance of interactions and a deep understanding of how the method supports family interaction and family connections and how important that is for children. Seems to be part of the air that Juconi breathes, and it's a great pleasure to see that having happened, to see that has happened, and the smiles on people's faces when they talk about VIG and their experience and their work with Jane it's all just a great pleasure to see, and it really tells me that this method and Juconi really work hand in glove.
No, how can you realize that? Because I know for Jane it's like something that is every month.
Yes.
She saw it for a lot of time, but you didn't saw that.
Right, I haven't seen it month by month by
Yeah.
month, but what I have seen is any time I have a conversation with someone from Juconi who talks about VIG, there's a sense of joy and satisfaction in the work. But when they talk about families and children, Juconi's staff seem to really understand the role of families to hold children and support children in a way that regulates and nurtures and supports growth. All of the things that we talk about.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's interesting to hear Terri's observations because she hasn't been as close to it as I have. For me, from the beginning, I think the close links between the VIG method and the core values and beliefs of Juconi were always clear. What became extraordinary for me was the way in which you as an organization began to integrate it into your programs, and what was particularly exciting, what I would come back month after month and share a bit with Terri, was the way in which we began to think about the broader kinds of uses and applications. So we began with just, with work with families and some leadership and supervision, but then also the work that began to be done with groups of moms.
Yeah.
And using VIG. And we've talked about it, whether implemented fully or not, but in terms of supervision and hiring and how the language of the method now is central to everything you do in the programs, and I think too in the Institute with trainers, that thinking about all of our sort of classic VIG language is embedded in the way you talk about your work. You talk about your work with families, you talk about your work with staff, and you talk about how you collaborate with one another.
And that leads me another question. That is, as you see, we have the parts in Juconi which we use the complete method. And there's another part in which we use just the little pieces of the method. So for some people will feel like, well, you're not being like so orthodox or hygienic in using the method. And how is the sense for you, like the the people that is just training the clear method, just that has to be, just look at someone is taking just these little pieces in some places and the entire method. So how does this feel?
Okay, so I'm going to qualify my answer a little bit. So when we bring video interaction guidance to an institution, the most important thing for us, and jump in if you think I've missed something or I'm off base a little bit, but the most important thing for us is that they understand the full application and implementation of the method, and that there is at least a strong cohort of leadership supervisors and practitioners who are fully trained in VIG. Once there are both practitioners and trainers, and it begins to be completely integrated and infused into things, then taking pieces of it and using it is okay because it's within the context of an understanding of the whole.
Okay.
When it's only used as a piece and not as part of a whole, that opens up risk factors. So particularly in organizations that don't have fully embedded in their practice strength-based practice. So we have had people who have taken this and think, well, we ought to be able to show people video of where things are going very wrong.
Okay.
And we don't, as you know, that's not a core piece of the way we work. We don't think it supports growth and development. It supports a sense of failure and disempowerment and so forth. The thing that we're most interested in is when people are using pieces, that those pieces then find a way back to us.
Okay.
Because there may be ways in which that then we can integrate. I mean, we consider ourselves, as I talked yesterday about Juconi being a learning organization. I think that's very much how we think about the Center for Video Interaction Guidance in the US. And so we're always interested in hearing how people are thinking about the application of the method and building on that. I mean, I think I say this in every intro course, 90% of the training materials we use have been tweaked from the training sessions we have done and the kinds of thinking that we get in the groups of people that we train and what they tell us, and we then build that into subsequent trainings.
What I would say just briefly about that is that in an organization that really understands the value of strength-based work and has a full understanding of the model as a whole, VIG becomes a tool. And you don't always need to use every piece of a tool in every minute. And the question is it enhancing the staff? Is it enhancing the work? And are we in dialogue together?
And I would say not just enhancing, but I would say a step further, so that there's almost no piece of the methodology that won't in some way enhance the work. So what I would challenge people who want to use a piece of it to think about is you can enhance and you can maximize. So what can you further do by using the whole or a larger piece of the whole than what you're able to do with just a piece?
Okay, that's good. Because so again, in the same way, I was thinking like you have this organization. I thought that they have these little pieces, but sometimes exists the fear that maybe they will transform in other thing, or they will use, or I don't know if it's misapproach or misunderstand, so they will transform it until this something totally different.
That's a really important risk. I mean, you're raising a very important point, and I talked a little bit about that around implementation research. So implementation research requires that first you ensure that a method is a fit for your belief system, your core values and beliefs.
Okay.
But then you have to ensure that you provide sufficient training and coaching, and I want to make sure that we're clear that those go hand in hand. Training teaches information and knowledge. Coaching is what instills that new information and knowledge into practice. So absent coaching, I think it's very hard to change people's practice so that they can integrate a new method or way of working. By way of answering this, there was a model many years ago in the United States. I'm going to forget this. Home builders, thank you. Home builders. That was at that point, and I would imagine that we're talking at least 25 years ago. Home builders was the first major public-private partnership of funding in the United States. Massively funded. And different states wanted to adopt it. So it went to one state and the public people funded and the private people funded, but they said, no, it's too expensive. We can't have one clinician working with just 2 families.
Okay.
That's too expensive. We need to have one clinician working with 6 families, and we can't work with a family for a year.
Okay.
We need to work with a family for 6 months.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, what people were calling home builders was no longer home builders, and guess what? They were no longer replicating the outcomes of the original program. And what happened? People said home builders wasn't effective.
Okay.
Because they were calling it home builders and it wasn't home builders. So that's the risk.
Yeah.
And so if people aren't trained to implement it in a way where they can replicate your outcomes and they're calling it video interaction guidance, then what happens is video interaction guidance is no longer seen as a successful, efficacious model that can impact people's lives.
What are the things that you do to make this, the video interaction guidance keep safe about this, transforming until it's nothing?
Well, I think built in to our model is the parallel process and the training and coaching model. So it's fairly rigorous.
No.
It's over an extended period of time. We expect people to do both a quantitative amount of work, a certain amount of families and cases and visits they have to do, and there are qualitative assessments along the way through direct supervision.
And what that does is that it ensures that there's always a feedback so that the process of supervision and training helps to maintain the fidelity of the model, because what you're talking about is really critical. That's what we mean, is that in order for VIG to keep its identity and to keep its effectiveness, it has to be true to the model. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, because sometimes people say, oh, okay, I like this, but I don't like this part, and I know that I can do this, and I start doing it by myself. So.
And it becomes some kind of free-range other thing.
Yes.
And we are very protective of the name video interaction guidance for just that reason. Lots of people, everyone has a video camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
So everyone can do some kind of video. But to do video interaction guidance is way more than a camera and a family or camera and a supervision situation. And the model is important, and the training and the consistency is very important.
And it does change. I mean, one of the things, we talk about this a lot in my visits here, but it's as if, right, you're given a new set of lenses, and you now see interactions, and not just between parents and their children, or teachers and students, but between adults too, in a profoundly different way. And the more exposure you have, the more video you see, the more training you get, that deepens and amplifies that shift in how you look at the world. And it would be unfortunate if people were just to say, oh, this is just about a camera in a room and I can just snap video and then I'm a video interaction guider.
Yes, just to finalize this, is for us it's obvious all the benefits that come to the conference, and you can spread the ideas and share with the people that we are possibly training in the future. But for you, what is the benefits that you have of coming here?
For the conference in particular?
Yes.
Well, there's so much exciting work happening around the world, and the opportunity to connect with colleagues from around the world who have very different methodologies, but very much a shared heart and a shared vision. And this conference does that in a way that not a lot of conferences do, I think. And I think that's one of the most, for me, it's personally one of the most enhancing things, the chance to do it. There's also the chance to talk about VIG, which we love to do, and to help other people understand its benefits, but also just to be impressed and to have some hope. With all of these people doing all of these things, there is hope for children and families, even if the
Mm.
world is a little scary. It's there.
And I think, so part of what I love when I come here is being able to see all the folks I've worked with over time at Juconi be articulating how they're integrating VIG and the principles and how they articulate it to others. It's one thing to share that with me. It's another thing for me to be able to see
Okay.
how people talk about it and share it with others. And the other piece I think for us always, as Terri said, we love to talk about it. So if you would have come into either our keynote or our workshop yesterday, I mean, there was a buzz in the room, and we can talk about it for hours. We always run out of time, because when we bring video, we can talk about, as you know, when we had
For hours.
a minute and a half of video, and we could talk about it for 4 hours. So, and to feel that excitement in the room, and some of the folks in the room were new Juconi staff.
Yeah.
And some of the folks in the room were from, other countries. And it's just always excited to watch people's faces light up as they say, wait a minute, we saw this video, 3 minutes ago, and we thought one thing. Now we've looked at it again with you, and it's as if we're looking at an entirely different thing. So for us,
That's a joy.
that's a very special joy.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was very, very interesting.
Good.
Well, I think that was finished.